oh my goodness, this is rather interesting that Sue Bird has brought this up to Kelsey Mitchell in light of some of the drama from a couple of days ago when Stephanie White was very clear and there was no confusion looking at anybody out there, including people on YouTube, that may think that was misconstrued, even though Stephanie White is the one that said these things. And I'm not going to go after specific YouTubers because that's not what I do. But the idea that people weren't going to take her words.
When Stephanie White spoke, it didn't sound like a casual coaching update. It sounded like a statement that could reshape an entire locker room. In an interview that was supposed to focus on the team's growth, she said Kelsey Mitchell was our top priority. Straightforward words, but they landed like a thunderclap. The moment she said it, fans froze. The Fever had just gone through a season that revolved around a new era, built on the excitement Caitlin Clark brought to the league. So when the coach publicly crowned Mitchell as the focus, people didn't hear team strategy. They heard something closer to rejection. On social media, comments exploded within minutes. Some fans defended White's loyalty to a proven veteran. Others accused her of downplaying the player who had transformed the NBA's popularity in a single season. It didn't matter what White actually meant. What people heard was that the Fever might be choosing one star over another. And in sports, perception is everything. This wasn't just a tactical discussion about offense or rotations. It was about symbolism, about what it means to build around a player who carries a movement. White's sentence turned into a headline. The headline turned into a debate, and the debate turned into a storm.
It was easy to see this coming, like clockwork really, because Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell complement each other on the floor and off the floor. They complement each other on the floor as the most dangerous duo in the WNBA, the most fearsome backcourt. Clark's ability to control the game, shoot from deep, bring the defense out, dice you up with the passes, get to the cup. Kelsey Mitchell's ability to just score in microwave fashion, unstoppable, so fast, back cuts, getting up and down the floor, breaking you down off boogie moves. You know, together, it's essentially unstoppable. Even one or the other is unstoppable at times. So
Within hours, the pushback hit full force. Fans, analysts, and even former players started weighing in. Many said it was unthinkable that a coach would publicly commit to one player when a generational talent like Caitlin Clark was right there on the roster. To them, this wasn't team culture, it was tone-deaf leadership. But others pointed out something deeper. Maybe White's comment wasn't about dismissing Clark at all. It was about loyalty. Kelsey Mitchell had been there through the lean years, when the Fever were scraping for relevance and wins. She'd stayed, fought, improved, and earned her stripes long before the spotlight arrived. So when White called her the priority, maybe it was respect, not rebellion. Still, the optics were impossible to ignore. At a time when the league was surging in visibility, fans wanted unity and direction. Instead, they saw confusion. Building around one star is common. Every dynasty does it. But this situation felt different, almost personal. Because when a franchise finally lands a player who brings national attention, ticket sellouts, and network deals, most teams instinctively center everything around that momentum. So when the Fever didn't, the basketball world started asking the same question. Why? Was this loyalty, miscommunication, or something bigger? An old school coaching mindset struggling to adjust to a new school superstar era.
It's the building around Kelsey Mitchell that I took issue with, because you got a generational Jordan-like talent on this team in Caitlin Clark. The Bulls did not choose to build around Scottie Pippen. All right? Look. The Blazers weren't building around Terry Porter. They were building around Clyde Drexler. I mean, the Knicks weren't building around Anthony Mason or John Starks or Derek Harper. They were building around Patrick Ewing. We could go on.
Critics quickly brought receipts from basketball history. The Chicago Bulls didn't build around Scottie Pippen. They built around Michael Jordan. The Celtics, even with multiple Hall of Famers, always revolved around Larry Bird. In every generation, there's a clear focal point. The one player who elevates everyone else. So when the Fever seemed hesitant to build fully around Clark, analysts called it baffling. Not because Mitchell isn't elite, she's one of the most explosive guards in the league, but because every successful franchise recognizes when it has lightning in a bottle. And Clark, like it or not, is lightning. But there's another angle people often forget. Great teams don't survive on star power alone. For every Jordan, there's a Pippen who steadies the ship. For every Bird, there's a McHale doing the heavy lifting in the paint. Maybe the Fever weren't ignoring Clark's star power. They were trying to build something sustainable around balance instead of hype. Still, when you're watching the fastest growing player in women's sports history light up arenas, it's easy to understand why fans expected the franchise to go all in. The disconnect wasn't about skill. It was about message. And in today's media world, the message often matters just as much as the basketball.
MVP Kelsey t-shirts, apparently her idea, right? Like that's all part of this. So these narratives that come into play are increasingly ridiculous and increasingly, basically just fueled by nonsense. And Sue Bird had Kelsey Mitchell on her podcast. And basically, Sue talked to Kelsey about the setup for this was how difficult it is to deal with some of the narratives, because when you have a figure like Caitlin Clark who comes in, it is indeed so transformative, meaning, the entire dynamics of things can change as far as...
If things weren't already complicated, Amber Cox made sure they would be. As one of the Fever's top executives, her voice carries real weight, and instead of calming the storm, she poured gasoline on it. In a follow-up interview, Cox doubled down, saying flat out that re-signing Kelsey Mitchell was the organization's #1 priority. To the outside world, that sounded like a smart business move. You keep your proven scorer, your long-term anchor, your veteran leader. But for fans who were still reeling from Stephanie White's earlier comments, it sounded like a coordinated message. The front office and coaching staff aligned behind one vision that didn't necessarily include Clark as the centerpiece. It's amazing how words can twist depending on timing. If those same statements had come a year earlier, nobody would have blinked. But now the Fever had Caitlin Clark, the player who broke every college record, boosted national ratings, and brought millions of new eyes to the WNBA. Every decision, every quote, every contract negotiation suddenly carried symbolic weight. And so, Cox's comment wasn't heard as re-signing our vet. It was heard as doubling down against the fan base's golden child. Whether that was fair or not didn't even matter. The narrative had already written itself. A front office focused on loyalty, while fans demanded vision. And somewhere between those two sides, the truth was quietly getting lost.
Coach.
In your locker room. So what do you think, or do you feel like people sometimes just overlook your leadership specifically and your impact on the team from a chemistry standpoint, because there's just so many narratives? So do you think people are overlooking that?
I think that in a short, yeah. I think naturally, yes, because of the society, the social media, and how bad people take to social media and abuse it in the wrong realm of light. And so I think that's one part of it. But I also think that
covering basketball teams is now abusing.
Just when it seemed like the noise would never stop, Kelsey Mitchell herself stepped forward and completely shifted the mood. Appearing on Sue Bird's Bird's Eye podcast, Mitchell decided to speak directly instead of letting others keep framing her story. Her tone wasn't defensive. It wasn't bitter. It was calm, mature, and most importantly, honest. She acknowledged the awkward headlines, the supposed rivalry, the team tension that everyone online kept fueling, and then she dismantled it. Mitchell said there was no personal issue, no drama, no secret jealousy. Instead, she described the arrival of Caitlin Clark as an adjustment, one that any team would need to make when adding a player of that magnitude. Her words hit differently because they weren't rehearsed. You could tell she meant every syllable. She talked about chemistry, about patience, about learning to move as one. And that simple honesty melted away months of noise faster than any press release could. Fans suddenly saw the human side. Two professionals figuring it out, not two rivals fighting for the same spotlight. And in that one appearance, Mitchell did what the organization couldn't. She cooled the fire. She reminded everyone that basketball, at its core, is about teamwork, not Twitter threads.
Clark, who comes in, it is indeed so transformative, meaning, the entire dynamics of things can change as far as the amount of attention, what is being said. It's just yesterday is not the same as today when there is that kind of sea change. Here's what Kelsey Mitchell had to say in response, at least part.
That was big for everybody. Pacers Entertainment, People Organization. I felt like at that time, there was a lot of, role playing that had to be, situated. I feel like, that when something that big or someone that big who has that much impact comes into something, there are a lot of...
Then came the line that nobody saw coming. The one that rewrote everything people thought they knew about the Fever locker room. Kelsey Mitchell said, without hesitation, "Caitlyn's never acted like she's bigger than this team." It was a powerful sentence, short but filled with weight. For months, online debates had painted Clark as a diva, as someone who wanted to run the show, control the ball, and dictate the spotlight. But here was a veteran, someone with every right to feel threatened by Clark's fame, saying the exact opposite. She talked about Clark's humility, her work ethic, and how she's constantly focused on blending in, not standing out. That was the moment fans realized how off the public perception had been. Mitchell explained that Clark didn't come into the locker room acting like a celebrity. She came in like a teammate. She listened, asked questions, and tried to understand how to make everyone better. That humility, Mitchell said, was why the team's chemistry had grown stronger, not weaker. Since Clark's arrival, it was a rare thing, a star defending another star without ego, without agenda. And it revealed a truth that cut through all the noise, that sometimes the media builds walls that don't even exist. Inside that Fever locker room, respect ran both ways. The real story wasn't about rivalry, it was about balance. Two players learning how to coexist in a moment bigger than either of them alone.
People Organization, I felt like at that time, there was a lot of, role playing that had to be, situated. I feel like, that when something that big or someone that big who has that much impact comes into something, there are a lot of adjustments that people have to make on the floor, off the floor, in the locker room, in the training room. Just a lot of stuff is a lot of moving parts. And I think the biggest part that I respected about Caitlyn is that she never was bigger than the program. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it wasn't like she wasn't trying to take over. It wasn't...
Kelsey Mitchell didn't stop there. She leaned in, smiling as she described how Caitlin Clark's style didn't clash with hers. It amplified it. "She fits right into what we do," Mitchell said. "The way she sees the floor helps me get to my spots. The way I push the pace helps her find rhythm." That single comment reframed everything. Fans who thought the two guards were secretly battling for touches suddenly started imagining what they could become together. Instead of rivals, they looked like balance and contrast. Clark with her deep vision and court awareness, Mitchell with her lightning drives and fast trigger scoring. Even Aaliyah Boston was part of that equation, benefiting every time Clark's passes sliced defenses open. Mitchell went deeper, talking about Clark's passion for the game. She mentioned how Caitlyn's energy never dips. Injured or not, she's in huddles, laughing, studying plays, and hyping teammates. "Her fire doesn't change," Mitchell said. "That's what you want around you." It didn't sound like PR spin. It sounded like respect. It's funny how quickly things change once players start speaking for themselves. The feud that fans imagined was really just two competitors learning to share oxygen in a small room filled with bright lights. And when Mitchell called Clark's passion contagious, it felt like the first honest description of how this team actually works.
I respected about Caitlyn is that she never was bigger than the program. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, it wasn't like she wasn't trying to take over. It wasn't, I don't know how to explain that. You know what I'm trying to say though?
Yeah, no, I know what you're trying to say. It's like, she knows who she is. She comes in, she's gonna obviously do her part because that's what being a professional athlete is. But with the understanding of fitting into a team, making sure we fit, making sure we have chemistry. So it's never bigger than like the group
it's like
itself.
She wasn't trying to be bigger than everybody. Like within our locker room, she wasn't trying to be bigger than anyone else. And I think the way that her style...
Then came the story that melted the internet. Mitchell calling Clark her little sister. No tension, no animosity, just family. She shared how they talk hoops nonstop, trade film clips, joke about missed shots, and even clown each other online. It's the kind of friendship people rarely see because the cameras catch only the highlight reels and the handshakes. Behind the scenes, it's laughter, teasing, and a shared obsession with getting better. That single detail, the little sister line, did more for their public image than any press campaign ever could. It made the locker room feel human again. It reminded everyone that sports are built on connection, not competition between teammates. Fans who'd spent months debating chemistry suddenly found themselves smiling. The comment section shifted from Clark versus Mitchell to these two might actually be unstoppable. And that's the power of authenticity. When people see something real, they stop searching for drama. But Mitchell's honesty also revealed how skewed the narrative had become. While the media kept stirring rumors of ego and control, the players were just bonding. Their shared love for the game was what fueled everything. Not jealousy, not fear, not marketing, just basketball and mutual respect.
Within our locker room, she wasn't trying to be bigger than anyone else. And I think the way that her style of play, it ended up complimenting me, ended up complimenting AB. And so, like, the one thing I love about Caitlin, too, is that we all love basketball the same way. We all have our different styles of way of playing it, but the passion for it with Caitlin, when she didn't play compared to when she did play, remained the same. And, like, I respected that about her because it could have easily not been that way. You know, you have people that come in and not want to do or buy in once it's not, you know, or once it don't go their way, or once unfortunate things happen and you can't play and injury happens and you're not getting your body the way you want to.
Ironically, the biggest divide wasn't between the players at all. It was between perception and reality. Stephanie White's comments had created an image of a split locker room, a franchise torn between two stars. But inside that locker room, unity was the headline. Mitchell and Clark didn't need to post selfies or make speeches to prove it. Their play said enough. They moved in sync, celebrated each other's shots, and visibly enjoyed playing together. Every fist bump, every shared grin after a tough bucket told the story fans weren't being shown. The real tension was upstairs, between what the management said publicly and what the players were quietly building on their own. The coaching staff's messaging felt clumsy, almost out of touch with what was really happening on the court. While the front office talked about priorities, the players were busy forming one of the most cohesive backcourts in the league. That disconnect became the true controversy. Fans weren't angry at Clark or Mitchell. They were frustrated that the people running the show didn't seem to recognize the chemistry developing right in front of them. And that's where the story shifted. It stopped being about a supposed rivalry and started being about leadership. Whether Indiana's decision makers actually understood the moment they were living in.
The play, it ended up complimenting me, ended up complimenting AB. And so, like, the one thing I love about Caitlin, too, is that we all love basketball the same way. We all have our different styles of way of playing it, but the passion for it with Caitlin, when she didn't play compared to when she did play, remained the same. And, like, I respected that about her because it could have easily not been that way. You know, you have people that come in and not want to do or buy in once it's not, you know, or once it don't go their way, or once unfortunate things happen and you can't play and injury happens and you're not getting your body the way you want to. And so I can respect the fact that she kept the program, and she didn't let her passion for it.
It's one thing to talk about chemistry, it's another to see it in motion. When Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell shared the court, you could feel the rhythm shift. Suddenly, the offense looked alive. Not like two stars sharing space, but like one complete system running on instinct. Clark would pull defenders past the arc, spacing the floor like gravity itself. Mitchell would cut, glide, and slash through openings before anyone realized what was happening. The ball zipped between them, fast but precise, and defenses had no time to recover. One moment, it was a pull-up three from Caitlin. The next, a lightning-quick drive from Kelsey. It was organized chaos, beautiful, and deadly. Analysts started calling them the most dangerous duo in the league, and it wasn't an exaggeration. Clark's court vision made everyone better, but especially Mitchell, whose scoring exploded once defenses started doubling Caitlin. Mitchell became the release valve, the finisher, the spark, and Clark, she was the architect. The one seeing plays two passes ahead. Together, they became a nightmare for defenders and a dream for highlight reels. Every game felt like a reminder that this wasn't a team of competing egos. It was a partnership built on rhythm, trust, and timing. That's what made the earlier priority comments from management sting even more. Because anyone who watched them play could tell they both mattered. Indiana didn't have to choose between them. The Fever were at their best when both stars thrived side by side.
He absolutely gave it everything. Aaliyah Boston's production dropped off the map when Caitlin Clark finally went out, and that was it, because that catalyst was no longer there to feed Aaliyah Boston the ball. You know? So I think this team is better, generally speaking, probably with all three of them. I do. Whether or not Kelsey decides to stay, I don't know. It may be the number one priority for Amber Cox, but is it the number one priority for Kelsey Mitchell?
If anyone needed more proof that Caitlin Clark's presence transformed the entire roster, they just had to look at Aaliyah Boston. When Clark was on the floor, Boston played like a different version of herself. Freer, more confident, more dominant. It was the kind of connection you see once in a generation. The guard who knows exactly when to feed the post, and the center who trusts that the ball will always find her hands. Fans began comparing it to John Stockton and Karl Malone. That seamless inside-out chemistry where every possession looked effortless. And the stats backed it up. With Clark active, Boston's field goal percentage soared. Her touches per game went up, her rhythm improved, and her confidence seemed unshakable. But when Clark got sidelined with injury, everything shifted. Boston's numbers dipped across the board. It wasn't a lack of effort, it was the absence of rhythm. Clark's playmaking had become the heartbeat of the team's offense, the thread connecting every moving part. And without it, the Fever's attack started to feel disjointed. Less fluid, less dangerous, less them. It was never about Clark stealing the spotlight. It was about her ability to make the light shine brighter for everyone else. The chemistry wasn't hype, it was tangible. You could measure it, watch it, and feel the difference. For Boston, that meant opportunity. For the Fever, it meant proof. You don't sideline the player who lifts the entire system. You build with her, not around or above her.
About Caitlin Clark, of course, long-time teammates at this point, relatively speaking, a couple of years into Caitlin Clark's WNBA career. Kelsey Mitchell is a free agent. I mean, that is a looming story for the Fever. So until she signs on the dotted line to return, that future remains at least part in question. You look, the entire league's future is in question when it comes to free agency for the most part. The Fever actually have more players locked up than most teams, considering Caitlin Clark is still on her deal, Aaliyah Boston is still on her deal, and Lexi Hull is a restricted free agent, meaning the Fever can match any.
But when Clark went down, Kelsey Mitchell stepped into the void. And the price she paid for that effort was brutal. She played harder, longer, and with more pressure than any guard in the league. Night after night, she became the offense, logging heavy minutes, taking tough shots, and carrying the load that used to be shared. For a while, it worked. Her scoring numbers climbed. Her energy carried the team. But you could see the exhaustion creeping in. The kind that doesn't just drain your legs, but your soul. And then came that moment no fan will forget. Late in the fourth quarter of a mid-season game, Mitchell collapsed near mid-court. Not from contact, from pure exhaustion. Trainers rushed over, helping her to the bench as the crowd went silent. It was the kind of image that said everything about how much she'd given and how little gas she had left to give. That moment wasn't just about fatigue, it was about structure. A reminder that no player, no matter how good, can carry a team alone. It made fans realize how deeply intertwined this roster had become. Without Clark's orchestration, Mitchell was forced into overdrive. Without Mitchell's scoring, Clark's gravity meant less. They weren't interchangeable. They were interdependent. It was a harsh human lesson in balance. And it showed everyone, from management to fans, that the Fever's strength was never about picking favorites. It was about protecting the system they'd accidentally built. One where each player made the other's greatness possible.
Yes, Kelsey may want to be the number one on a different team. Now, I would tend to believe that from a branding standpoint, it's more valuable for her to be a number two on what could be America's team. And I thought it for sure it was America's team for a while. And I think as far as the WNBA goes, it is America's team. But until they get some management issues sorted out, you know, got to pull back on that. Because
when the dust began to settle, all eyes turned toward Kelsey Mitchell's looming free agency. And suddenly, the question wasn't just what the Fever would do next, but what she would. Amber Cox had already made her stance crystal clear. Re-signing Mitchell was the franchise's top priority. On paper, that sounded like a no-brainer. A veteran scorer, an all-WNBA talent, the heartbeat of Indiana's locker room. But beneath the surface, fans started wondering if Mitchell herself saw the same picture. She's at a crossroads that every elite athlete faces at least once. Do you stay loyal to the team that built you? Or chase a new chapter where your talent might shine brighter, without organizational confusion clouding the story? There's a strong argument for staying. Indiana is on the verge of something special. The chemistry between Mitchell, Clark, and Boston could become a legacy trio, the kind that defines a decade. From a branding standpoint, being part of America's team in the making might outweigh any short-term frustrations. But on the flip side, loyalty only works when it's mutual. If management truly believes in her, they need to prove it. Not just through words and pressers, but in structure, support, and roster building. Because for all the friendship and shared sacrifice on the court, no player wants to stay somewhere that doesn't feel fully aligned. Mitchell's decision will say as much about the Fever's direction as any press release ever could.
The agency, as she should be. That was what Stephanie White talked about the other day that got the blowback. I mean, so many people missed the context of the question that was asked to her, which was about free agency and how could Kelsey Mitchell not be the #1 priority in free agency. And of course, they want to continue building around Kelsey Mitchell. They want to continue building around that core. But it's unmistakable what Caitlin Clark brings when she walks in the door. You see it on the floor, right? Like you see it's the reason for everything else. All of the rest comes because of that. All of the rest has been built on that.
While the players were busy proving unity on the court, the organization was losing something much harder to rebuild: the fans' trust. Everything came to a breaking point when Caitlin Clark's injury timeline became the center of speculation. Not because she was hurt, but because of how the situation was handled. Week after week, fans were told she was close, that she'd probably play soon. Tickets sold, hype built, families saved up, traveled, filled arenas expecting to see her return. And then, nothing. No clear update, no transparent statement, just silence and disappointment. It wasn't just a PR blunder, it was a breaking of faith. When a franchise asks people to believe in something, honesty has to be part of the deal. Instead, the team came off like they were stringing fans along, and that hurt more than any loss on the court. Social media turned harsh fast. Comments piled up under every post. Why not just be honest? We spent money for this. You owe your supporters more transparency. And those voices weren't from trolls. They were from the same people who'd stood by the Fever all season, buying jerseys and defending the team online. That gap between the front office and the fan base widened overnight, and it became clear that while the players had bonded through adversity, management still had a lot to learn about communication and accountability.
Because there's a lot of trust issues now between many Caitlin Clark fans and the organization because of how the injury was disclosed and handled and all that drama. I got to tell you right now, there is a massive portion of fans, and I'm not sure a lot of fans realize this, there's a massive portion of fans that are furious with the Indiana Fever and with the WNBA over how that injury was handled, and they kept stringing fans along. Fans are pissed off over that, and rightfully so for people that...
By the end of the season, the frustration wasn't just about wins and losses. It was about awareness. Did the Fever's leadership truly understand what they had? Because when a team has the potential to become the face of a league, every decision matters tenfold. Fans weren't asking for perfection, just direction. They wanted to see the same clarity and conviction from the front office that the players were showing on the floor. But instead, between the mishandled injury updates and Stephanie White's public comments, the Fever looked unsure of themselves. It raised a difficult question. Could this franchise truly embrace its own spotlight? Because whether they liked it or not, Indiana had become the heartbeat of the WNBA. The ratings, the sold-out arenas, the buzz, it all centered around them. And yet, it often felt like they didn't quite believe it themselves. The irony? The players already were America's team. They were doing everything right. Grinding, sacrificing, sticking together through chaos. It was the leadership that had to catch up. If they didn't, all that momentum could fade just as fast as it arrived. This was their reflection point. The moment where Indiana had to decide whether to grow into greatness or fall back into mediocrity.
Adjusted, right? All of the other things can be configured. And the thing that the Fever have that can't be made up or replicated is the complement of their all-stars. And that's why you see them complement each other when they're playing or complement each other when they're doing interviews.
When the season finally closed, Caitlin Clark sat down for her exit interview and said one word that summed everything up: friendship. It wasn't about stats or awards or headlines. It was about connection. The glue that held everything together when the outside world kept trying to pull it apart. Kelsey Mitchell's exhaustion, Aaliyah Boston's consistency, Caitlin Clark's leadership, they all built something that numbers can't measure. They built trust where the system around them had failed to. While the front office fumbled and the media speculated, the players quietly grew tighter. And maybe that's the real story here. Not rivalry, not favoritism, not confusion, but resilience. Mitchell and Clark never became enemies because they never were. They became proof that stars can coexist without ego, that growth doesn't need drama to be compelling, and that the loudest headlines aren't always the truest. When you strip away the noise, the Indiana Fever have something every franchise dreams of. 3 stars who genuinely like each other, push each other, and fit together like puzzle pieces. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell. 3 players, 1 shared goal. The real shocker isn't that the team had issues. Every team does. The shocker is that through every misstep, every headline, and every PR stumble, the players stayed connected, grounded, and united. And if management ever learns to match that same energy, to lead with the same authenticity, the Fever won't just be the most talked about team in the WNBA. They'll be the one everyone believes in.